Gaming History 101.
The countdown has begun, and in just over a month, Nintendo will be releasing its new mini line of retro consoles. Specifically, the West will be receiving the NES Classic Edition, whereas the East gets the region-appropriate Famicom Classic Edition. While the differences between the two are slight, and you can find more specifics on that at GamingHistory101.com, the games packed into each console are a bit more diverse. Both regions will be receiving 30 games, and of those, 22 core games will be the same for the most part. Hardcore retro gamers will likely cite the regional differences between titles like Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link and its Japanese Famicom counterpart, Linku no Boken. We may delve into the subtle differences at a later date, but for now, let's take a look at the 8 titles exclusive to each region. Since most of our viewers are most likely from the West and have a decent grasp on this region's exclusives, it's probably best to start with the lesser-known titles exclusive to the Famicom Classic Edition. Atlantis no Nazo. Atlantis no Nazo, which is loosely translated to The Mystery of Atlantis, is a Sunsoft platformer from 1986. Back then, the Famicom was already 3 years old, but few titles held much more complexity than Super Mario Bros. Atlantis no Nazo tries to one-up Super Mario Bros. In everything it does, but ultimately comes up short. Granted, there are more mechanics, the ability to scroll left and right along the screen, and more levels. Unfortunately, the game is plagued by terrible physics, one-hit kills, and random orders to the levels that make it both frustrating and confusing. Thanks to its punishing nature, the title Super Mario Bros. Is easily more approachable and popular. It never came out in the US, but it's still a big deal in Japan and thus justifies being one of the coveted 30 in this Eastern release. Sappari Ozumo. Ever wanted to become a sumo wrestler and make your way up the circuit to be Yokozuna? If so, then Sappari Ozumo, or Bumping Sumo, is a Japan-only Tecmo release from 1987. You get to create your own sumo wrestler, and then make your way to the mat and earn ranks in your ultimate quest to become the Sumo Grand Champion. Mario Open Golf. This was really a toss-up for one of the random sports games Nintendo inevitably wanted included. While football is barely recognized in Japan, golf is a bit more popular. Not only that, but Mario Open Golf, which in the West was received as NES Open Tournament Golf, is approachable for all. With easy controls, mild difficulty, and some of Nintendo's most popular characters, it may even be the stronger sports choice between the two regions. This first-party Nintendo title, that originally released in Japan in 1987 and had the late great Satoru Iwata as one of its programmers, is a solid addition. Downtown Niketsu Monogatari and March Sorayuke. While we know a couple of the Kunio-kun titles were here in the West, Technos Japan's titles are legendary and abundant in the East. Downtown Niketsu Monogatari places lead character Kunio and rival Riki to team up and take on the local gangs from other high schools. This is actually the third title in the series, and having two enemies team up was a big deal when this title released to Japan in 1989. We would later get this game as River City Ransom, with the names disassociated from the series and previous storylines dissolved as well. Our version starred two friends, Alex and Ryan, attempting to save Ryan's girlfriend Cindy from the villainous Slick. March Sorayuke would come out a year later and remain exclusive to Japan, but it's an offshoot title or Gaiden game that features a sports challenge. It allows up to 4 players to compete in 4 different athletic events with 3 selectable high schools. While I totally get the presence of Downtown Niketsu Monogatari, which has a decent following in both the East and the West, the inclusion of March Sorayuke is a bit of a mystery to me. Perhaps it's sold better than I've been led to believe, or has more popularity, but as far as I knew, it was the weakest of the Kunio-kun titles on the Famicom. Either way, these two pay homage to the powerhouse of Technos Japan and the beloved Kunio-kun series in the East. Zer Kung Fu. Before fighting games took over in the early 90s, there was 1984's Karate Champ, followed by Konami's Zer Kung Fu in 1985. While we did get an arcade version in the West, it wasn't very popular and saw much more praise in the East. This title received 8 ports, of which 3 were only for Japan, including the Famicom version. Honestly, this title was even more popular in Europe, and the Famicom port isn't all that good, but it is an early look at what would later become a major genre. Solomon no Kagi. Better known as Solomon's Key in the West, Solomon no Kagi is a puzzle game that tasks you to find hidden keys in rooms and then move on to the next. With a huge number of rooms, more than 50, including secret rooms and no save feature, Solomon's Key was as difficult as it was impressive. You could also get yourself stuck in rooms thanks to the block creation and removal tool. It's a somewhat divisive title, but one that's just as popular in the West as it was in the East. The addition of save states also makes this title more tempting to play. Final Fantasy III. Many of you may know Final Fantasy VI as Final Fantasy III, given that that was the name given to the Western release on SNES. Actually, Final Fantasy III only recently came over thanks to the Nintendo DS and never saw a Western release on the NES. It was a robust RPG for the end of the Famicom's life and included 4 playable heroes in a party, but also introduced the popular job system. That said, Final Fantasy III is quite a difficult game when it's played in your native language, and this version will be in Japanese, so it's unlikely most English players will want to give this version a shot. If you do speak Japanese, as intended by Nintendo's Eastern-only release for this title, then this is an impressive addition to an already robust library. When you compare these 8 releases to the titles exclusive to the West, I can't see many being swayed by the Famicom Classics package. Despite there not being much love in the East, Punch-Out!, Kid Icarus, Bubble Bobble, and Tecmo Bowl are staples of many NES collections back in the 80s for the US. Star Tropics was specifically designed for the West, to the point that Nintendo never even released it on the Famicom. Final Fantasy might have been re-released a bunch of times, but the original is still a decent RPG, even in its original form. There's probably an argument to be made by Castlevania 2 and Donkey Kong Jr. fans as well, so I can't really discredit those titles. While I can't speak to the impact of the Eastern exclusives in Japan, I can definitely assure that the Western version of the console strikes hard with some notable exclusives for the classic NES fans. And there you have it with our comparison of what comes with the Famicom Classic Edition and how it differentiates itself from the NES Classic Edition. You can check out more articles, videos, and the official podcast over at GamingHistory101.com, and don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to see more of our videos. In the meantime, this is Fred Rojas from Gaming History 101 saying peace out.